What's going on, everybody? Today we are doing something I think is pretty cool. I was perusing around the CrossFit Reddit, and I was like, man, we should just kind of go over someone's question. And we've talked about this before, and I've done it before and commented a few times. But I was looking through the Reddit every once in a while, something cool comes up, or I just kind of trying to stay in the know. And I saw someone looking to increase strength, and I read through it, read some of the questions. I was like, okay, cool. I could maybe help this person, but why not just use them as an example on the podcast? And maybe we could just post the link to the Reddit thread so they could watch it and hear what we have to say. So that's what we're going to do today. This person's looking to increase strength. We're going to go over the post. I'll explain it to you, and we'll kind of go through some of the comments and then give our take on it. So yeah. What'd you eat today? What was breakfast today?
Breakfast was a bowl of gains with a side of hypertrophy. That was my breakfast.
Wow. So you're the person to ask then for this.
Yeah. My subtitle is Godfather of Gains for a reason. So
yeah. I don't have a subtitle, but if it would be one, it would be Work Prime. So that's my nickname. People will, maybe one day our podcast will, someone will understand the joke by like 50, 60 episodes in, and the lore will be so deep. They'll be like, oh my gosh, that's why they call you Work Prime. I get it. But by then, hopefully that's not my nickname anymore.
No, your nickname's Critical Power.
Yeah. They call me CP. They call me the never ending battery. Mm-hmm. All right, let's get into it. I'm going to pull up the post. And if you've never been on the CrossFit Reddit, it's pretty good. It's not bad. It's just a lot of, if you are looking for shoes or apparel or grips or some stuff like that, there's a lot of people on there that'll give some pretty good reviews and chat about which one they like the most. So, but anyway, let's get into it. I'm a 34-year-old male. I have been doing CrossFit for almost 5 years. I usually do class and sometimes do the competitors track. I currently weigh 160 pounds. Some of my max lifts are clean 205, jerk 180, power snatch 145, deadlift 315, back squat 275. My goal is to increase my strength to be able to eventually RX more WODs. Example, snatch 155 comfortably, clean and jerk over 225. I'm good with a 50-pound dumbbell for most movements and have most of my gymnastic skills. I feel my weakness is both in my strength and technique in the barbell movements. And then also about the rest, he's wondering just some recommendations moving forward. Should he do some bodybuilding? Should he eat in a surplus and decrease his conditioning? And what should he realistically expect? And let's just say like a 3-month phase where he's really focusing on this. What could he get out of it? And he's just wondering. And then we got some comments down here. So comment number 1, good news. Squattober starts tomorrow. See you there. This should be downvoted. I'm not going to downvote it, but it should be downvoted. And unless it's kind of a joke, then it's kind of upvoted. I don't recommend this to anyone who's serious. But if you really wanted to have fun and do it, maybe just do it. But I seriously don't.
Real quick on this Squattober, just a quick side tangent. Well, one of my good friends, he's one of my groomsmen. He did it, and he's like the tightest. He's so tight. Like he's a classic sprinter, powerful guy. And then I saw him, I don't know, I saw him recently, and I was asking about how his training was going because I coached him for a little bit, but he'd been on his own. And he's like, oh, well, it was going well. And then I did Squattober, and then I like messed up my hips. And so I kind of like stopped lifting, and I've just been running now. And I was like, dude, why did you do that? You're like the total opposite person that would be intended for. Like you shouldn't be squatting every day for 30 days. So that aside, the person who started that and who's still running it, he was the strength coach at USC when I was there, AA. And some people are just born. I mean, I'd put you in this category too. Some people are just born who are just strong and naturally strong and powerful, and he's one of them. He was a shot putter, Aaron Osmus.
Okay.
Coach AA. He won the national championship at Tennessee in the shot put. He had a national record for a while, but he's just a big guy, super nice, really kind. He always gave me a lot of respect because I was always lifting weights. He didn't like the golf team though, because they didn't lift weights, but I got a get out of jail free card. Anyways, every so often he'd bench press like 405 for like a set of 5. He'd back squat like 500 for a set of 5, real casually. No grinding. He never grinded. And then he came up with Squattober. I don't know how many years it's been now, but he started it. And yeah, I mean, he's one of those just like strong. He moves well. He's built to squat. And yeah, so that's kind of Squattober. I've never done it. I was tempted a few times, but I just know my lower half would get messed up. So coming full circle, yes, not a great idea for most people, especially the person we're talking about today, because we'll keep the focus on this individual.
Mm-hmm. This person, yes, start a strength cycle, more sets in the 1 to 5 range, reduce the number of metcons, calorie surplus, expect to gain 0.5 pounds a week. Not terrible advice, maybe somewhat realistic and generalized, but Hatch is a really good program for most CrossFitters. I disagree. I have a bit of a higher ceiling than you, so it didn't improve my 1RMs. Mine were 335 on the squat, 405 on the deadlift. And he weighed 180 pounds, but it did make.
That's funny. He says it's a good program for CrossFitters, but then it didn't work well for him.
Hatch's front squat and back squat, both which are very relevant to CrossFit. It's much easier to add on to CrossFit. It's free. Unpopular opinion, maybe, but when you start Hatch or whatever program you start, I'd reduce the CrossFit days by 1 or 2. This is correct. I mean, again, I agree. I just say generalization.
Conditioning volume.
But yeah, Hatch, I would say it's kind of not similar to Squattober in like what it is, but you're squatting a lot and it's a lot of volume and it's really, really demanding. So I would say hard no to almost anyone. If anyone's going to tell you like, hey, do a program, like a Hatch, a Smolov, a X, whatever it is, it's really not going to fit in too well for most people. It can help you, but for CrossFit specifically, it's not intended to help you with CrossFit. Again, that's kind of a generalization on my part as well, but it's much easier to kind of design and tweak yourself. Maybe you could use one as like a template or as an idea. But we'll get more.
Let me add a little bit to that.
Yeah.
The thing with, again, let's keep this in the context of building strength. The thing with finite programs like a Hatch or a Smolov is you push your system past what it's capable of for a finite period of time, which allows you to get away with it. But it's as if you're climbing a mountain and you get to the top really quick, but then you have to go way down to get back to the bottom. And so you push your system really hard for a short period of time. And that doesn't mean you keep building upon those improvements. There's probably going to be a regression on the backside. The possibility of an injury comes up, the possibility of a compensation comes up that starts to now influence the rate of improvement of that particular movement. So if you look at most established powerlifters or potentially weightlifting circles as well, I'm not going to speak for them because I'm not sure on this. You'll see an alternative approach with strength development, which is it's much more stretched out and it's much more slowly and progressively built, so that you don't try to expedite the improvement because you'll run into walls really quickly, and you also won't really cement those improvements in your system. One way I kind of frame it is like you're not really owning the weight. Like you hit it, maybe at the end of Squattober you hit a PR, at the end of the Hatch you hit a PR, but you might not hit it again for a few years. I've seen that happen many times, and it's happened to me too.
Or ever.
Or ever. I did small of like 4 times in college because I thought that's what I need to get my squat up. It worked the first time because it was a real novel stimulus, which is, of course, usually what's happening that first time is it's very novel. And anytime you increase the frequency and you tap that tool, you get it and you get the adaptation. But then once you do it, it's pretty much gone for a long time. Like you can't use that for a long, long time. And now you can't really build upon that because you did an overflow of volume of intensity. And so now you have to, of course, back it off. So all that to say, you got to be real careful with real fast, expedient type programs for strength development, because most often you'll run into problems unless you're taking drugs. If you're taking drugs, then yeah, go for it. Doesn't matter. But for normal people,
Yeah.
you got to be a lot more conservative with your strength approach to training, or approach to training strength.
Yeah, I guess quick, if you want to end the episode quick and you're the guy who wrote this and you're listening and you're willing to take drugs, you could literally just take drugs and change nothing and you'll just get stronger. So yeah, you could do that.
Yeah,
This
you
guy
still want to
says
decrease the training frequency of your like intensive work. CrossFit less.
But yeah, to
this
maximize it.
Yeah, this guy's smart though. Strength cycle, eat more, CrossFit less. That would be the quickest way to summarize it.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a lot of intricacies in all three of those, but that's the bulk. I mean, we don't have to go any further. That's pretty much it right there.
Yeah, Banana Dance Man hit it. And then I was just going to say, similar to what you said, like 5x5, 5-3-1, like the principles of them are good. They just might not fit into you. So if you read about them well, you might be able to kind of understand what Sam's talking about and trying to just elongate it, because 5x5 is really just progressive overload, and it's a good weight range.
If you did those, because I've done that and 5-3-1 a lot in my own training when I was younger. If you do that with the intention of doing it for like 5 years in a row, or staying like progressively building it and not trying to really peak it, then that works. Because those programs, they're not necessarily trying to push you to a ceiling. Whereas the other ones that we mentioned, they're aggressively pushing you to a ceiling at a specific day that's not too far in the future. Whereas 5-3-1, one of Wendler's big ideas was like, you can just do it forever. You can keep building and growing, and it doesn't have to end at any point. So so I like that person's advice.
And I think 5-3-1 is good to learn, because I think there's like the free ebook online. You can just read it. He explains it and talks about it. You can either do it exactly how he says or change it up a little bit. A lot of it is max reps and reps in reserve, so it can kind of teach you a little bit, and also kind of plays a role in somewhat of like auto regulation, as like you're going to go for max reps. So like if you are a little more tired or more stressed, that you can still make effective gains with it. So yeah, pretty much all of them are, I'd say, fairly the same. And someone said those numbers are pretty good for someone your size. So yeah, props to you, dude. You're pretty got some pretty good numbers. So let's adjust the screen here. We'll get to chatting a little bit. Well, first, we got all his metrics. We can go over them again, but overall, we saw his metrics: 160 pounds, male, 34 years old. He wants to increase his strength and eventually RX more workouts, and he feels that his weakness is the strength and technique in the barbell movements. So yeah, we did a podcast not too long ago, but few months ago, and it was about strength in the sport of CrossFit, which is kind of what we're talking about here. He wants to improve his performance, whether he's really competing or just wanting to improve in the gym and during the open. That's still kind of in the same context. We have a few notes from that podcast that we're going to go over, and hopefully it'll help give you a good idea of what you should be working on. And then we'll maybe add in a little more specific tips for the gentleman who asked the question. But first is why we need to, what's important, why and how we should improve the strength, the goal of strength in CrossFit. You want to read that one?
Well, yeah, but before I go there, something like this, there's a million things we could bring up, anybody could bring up, to try to solve how to get this person stronger. And again, back to Banana Man or whatever his name was, he summarized it perfectly, which was there needs to be a bias in your training towards strength development, which we can talk about. There needs to be a decrease in intensive metabolic activity, or CrossFit in this example. And you need to be eating a lot more. Like, it needs to be in a caloric surplus to support anabolism, to support recovery, support hypertrophy, to build size. So that's the all-encompassing kind of three pillars. Like you need those three. And if you do that, you'll be on your way getting closer to these goals that you have. So having said that, now there's about a million things you could pick apart, like with this and that we could go after to say, like, you need to do this, you need to do that. So I just wanted to preface that because somebody could do a podcast just like we are, and they could have totally different ideas and ways of approaching it. But at the end of the day, you look at both of them and they all distill down to like those three things. So I just want people to know that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so
you're right.
I had a few questions because I want to show people how we might be thinking about improving strength for this person. And so part of that is going to be dictated by some of these questions I have, because this isn't a ton of information to get a really good picture of who he is, where he's been, what he's done, which all that kind of goes in and filters out what approach you would take and what is a reasonable improvement in strength. So, like, for example, where was he when he started CrossFit 5 years ago? Like, was he 160 pounds? Like, could he lift any weight? Was he 120 pounds? Was he 180 pounds and he lost weight? Like, where was he 5 years ago? And to a point you mentioned, was he doing any training before then? Like when he, because he was 29 5 years ago. So that's a lot of years potentially lifting weights. Did he lift any weights, or did he just start when he was 29? So how much progress has he actually made in the 5 years? Like, yeah, you've been doing CrossFit for 5 years. That doesn't really mean anything. Like, again, you could have came in cleaning 135 and now you clean, 205. It's like, well, 5 years, like, okay, that's not a lot. Again, back to body weight. So that's another question. How long has he been 160 pounds? So like being 34 years old, which the average lifespan of an American male is like 72 now. So he's almost halfway on the average to like halfway of life spent, and he's 160 pounds. So how long has he been 160? Like, so that's important to know. Has he ever tried to gain weight? Like, has he ever tried to put on mass? And if he did, was it successful? Was it not? What did he do? So with this type of avatar and the metrics and the age and the training, there's a lot that the more information we're getting in these areas, it's easier to figure out like what we actually need to be doing, because the more gray the target is, you're just kind of you're shooting someone in the dark. You're just like, or shooting through the fog would be a better way of framing it. So these questions are trying to like push the fog away, so I can go, oh, okay, this is where he's kind of at. And this is, of course, a plug for one-to-one coaching, because you can be a lot more precise in how you're going to attack these goals this person has. Otherwise, you have to be very general and generic, like you see in the Reddit thread. So that's those are the questions that I just wrote down that I wanted to share. Having said that, now we can get into I'm going to talk more about the ages piece, ages, and then I'm going to go into like requirements for strength expression, those three. So I have like two sets of three things that tie into strength, which we did talk about on that one episode, but it's a good refresher. So when you think about a human and their potential for improvement in a physical endeavor, you want to think about three different types of ages that they have. So you have your chronological age, which would be how many days you've actually been alive. So if he's 35 times 365, that's a certain amount of days. And that's very different than if you've only been alive for half that length of time in days, just by themselves. Then there's biological age, which is looking at the context and the color of those days. So if you're 35, but you've been in 2 wars, you've lost a child, you've had cancer, like you've been homeless, that's going to have a very different makeup on your biology than if you're 35, you have a bachelor's degree, you have a stable job, you have a family, you have kids. Thankfully, there's no big problems with your life or stress from that standpoint. Like, the biology inside is very different, which is going to influence your adaptation and ability to handle stress inside of the gym. And then your training age, which is the one that most people are familiar with because this is the one that gets highlighted the most when you're assessing people and what they're capable of. And so the training age is looking at what have you actually done in the gym or outside of the gym since you started movement when you were a kid. Did you play sports growing up? Did you lift weights in high school? Did you not? Did you run? And then did you do no weightlifting in your 20s? Did you just find CrossFit when you were 30 years old? And that was your first introduction to actual resistance training? Or have you been doing it for 20 years? So you take those 3 ages, and that helps start to create a more noticeable or recognizable mold of who this person is and what's possible. Like what can you actually extract from them from a training standpoint? So with this individual, those are things that we would need to know to get a better idea of like, well, how, like, what can we actually do with him? And I know you wrote down he's 35 years old, so we know that chronological age, which already that's different than if he was 25, because we know how hormones shift at certain points in your life. There's, of course, different developmental phases of your life for men and women. So him being 35, he's past puberty. Obviously, his nervous system's fully developed. We know from research, most of your like peak physical potential from a strength power perspective will come in your 20s to late 20s. It gets extended out when the speed component drops. So like powerlifting will be into the 30s. But if he's 25, it's a different conversation because he's going to have a lot more potential. Possibly. There will be people that would argue that, but all things being equal, if he was 25, there's a lot more potential with that age alone. But then, of course, we got to look at biological age. And we don't know anything about that because we don't know what his background's like or what he's been through. And then training age, we know he's been doing CrossFit for 5 years. But again, we don't know what type of CrossFit. Was he on a plan? Was it just general classes? How many days per week was he going? Did he ever get injured? Injuries, I didn't mention that. That sits inside of your training age. And then did he do anything before that? So we have very little context on these 3 ages. So it just makes it harder to hit the bullseye on like what we actually need to be doing. So
real quick, it makes it harder, but it also highlights that the importance of these things when you're trying to pursue a goal, or just how you may how someone should approach doing something if they're doing it on their own, whether they're working with a coach or not. We would want to gather this information and we would use it when we created a design for X person. But someone else could be listening to this and just decide, oh, wow, I haven't even thought about that. You could maybe go through a lot of things and decide there are other things you could work on that may be able to help, improve whatever said goal is.
Yeah, 100%. As a quick side note to that, thinking about like biological age, if you drink alcohol twice a week, every week, and you're trying to get stronger, that's a super easy shift you could make, which is removing that. And that can really help with your improved recovery, which can, of course, improve your adaptation to training, which can improve your ability to build lean mass, which will improve your ability to produce force and strength. And there's lots of research on this. So that's like one little way you can improve your biological age by changing something. Same with sleep. Like if you only sleep 6 hours on average and you start bumping up to 7, 8 hours after 3, 6, 9, 12 months, that's going to tremendously influence your recoverability, your ability to handle more training, your ability to push loads, adapt more effectively. So inside of each of those ages, chronological, you're not really going to do much because it's very objective. It's like how many days. It's not, there aren't these more gray pieces. But for the biological age and the training age, you can, training, so somewhat. Biological could be the one you could manipulate the most, which is also why biohacking is such a big industry these days, because people are trying to manipulate the lever that you can manipulate in a way, but there's no free lunches. So there's always trade-offs.
No biological free lunch.
No. Okay. So let me quickly go through the like requirements for strength expressions. Let's just, and then we'll come back to general thoughts about moving forward, which are more specific.
This can also give someone an idea of like how maybe they could start approaching it on their own or adjusting something for what they need.
Yeah. Okay. So the foundational element are those ages, which we just talked about. So you can think about those three. You can kind of look at yourself, where you at in each of them, and that'll give you insight on, do you have a lot of potential or do you not? And then of course that's going to influence the next three steps, the next layer, which are, there's three, in my opinion, there's like three main components that go into strength expression. The first one is biochemical ability. So that's cortisol, adrenaline, electricity, because it's an electrical connection between the brain and the muscles to produce strength. So the health and robustness of your hormonal system and the health and efficiency of your nervous system are going to influence your ability to produce force, to build strength, and recover from that. So you got to look at, how's your internal system working? Is it actually optimal for building strength? The next is mechanical strength, which is the one everybody's very familiar with. So the actual like lifting of the weight. So think about your muscle fibers, think about your tendons, your ligaments, all of the pieces, your connective tissue that go into the actual breaking down and tearing of those fibers to then rebuild and make them stronger to adapt. So you have to have mechanical strength. You have to have mechanical load, tension on the muscle to actually grow it. And then belief, which is you actually have to want to get stronger. Like if you don't really care, if you don't really have a deep need to get stronger, it doesn't happen magically. Like you won't tear down and build new tissue and put weight on the bar. Like you have to really want it. So, and that one's a big one. I think people sometimes overlook, because like you have, it gets really uncomfortable. Like lifting heavy weight, relatively speaking, is challenging. It's fatiguing. It can be a little painful at times, but like you have to keep kind of pushing on that. And you have to do it for a long, like years. You just don't do it for 8 weeks and then you got your new PR. It's like, no, you got to do it for a decade. So you have your ages. On top of the ages, you have your three components for strength expression: biochemical ability, so the internal systems; mechanical strength, so the actual load that you need; and then you have to believe that you can get stronger, so confidence and commitment. So you have those two, and then now you start going into the X's and O's that we will get into, that Roman, you outlined here, which is like, what are we actually going to do in training? How are we going to change our approach to facilitate this?
Which is kind of just and they're kind of just hit on his particulars, because like Sam said, you like, everyone needs the biochemical ability, and then the mechanical strength that kind of combined them. You got to be biomechanical. Everyone needs those. The approach just might look different for, well, it probably look the same for a lot of people, but the intricacies of them and how you approach them, and maybe how you introduce someone to them, or how long you spend at a certain time, or what you're really focusing on day to day, how many days they have to train. All of that is the little stuff that changes. So if he really wants to improve strength, we've already said it, he needs less conditioning, but you can still do it. You just need less and less stressful. So, you might still be able to do 3 conditioning sessions a week. They just might need to be really low intensity, or really, like not fatiguing you as much, and not as tough on your body. Maybe that for someone like him, that could be just more on the machines, removing a lot of extra
eccentric
movements
loading
that you would be doing. Yeah. Or it could be just, you could still do some of the other loading and do the other movements. Just they got to be really light effort, light load, and super relaxed.
Also, the total time. So that would be one way you'd want to think about it, is you want to decrease the amount of minutes you're spending in the week in this state of conditioning work, however you want to define that. Because that's what you're trying to minimize how much fatigue you're creating in that time, because it adds up, and also the depletion of glycogen, because that's going to influence your ability to recover and to get ready for the next strength session. So you want, if you want to be more granular, you're going to look at like, well, how many minutes in the week do I actually spend right now doing conditioning work? And I'm going to like cut that in half. And that's like a very simple way you can start moving yourself towards a state where you're going to be able to set yourself up to drive strength adaptations.
Okay. Next, I put in more tempo. So slowing down the movements. A couple of reasons. He had noted he wasn't really good at the technique. So slowing down tempo in pulls and squats, you're going to basically you're going to get stronger. It'll help, but also it'll help you learn the positions better, feel smoother in the positions. It slows it down for you. It's going to increase recruitment and challenge the CNS, maybe without as much load too, which is good. You know, if you're doing a squat that's 5 seconds down, you have to use a lot less load than if you're doing a squat going 2 seconds down.
Yep.
And again,
that's the tension, the mechanical load that we need. It's the tempo becomes your best friend if you're trying to get stronger. Like you need, because you got to put tension on the muscle.
Yeah, increasing body awareness, like being able to know where you are in space.
Well, and learning
a lot of reasons.
This is a big one that people again don't think about, which is something that bodybuilders are really good at. And they always call it the mind muscle connection, but there's a lot of truth to that. Is your brain, you have your motor cortex, which is the headquarters for all of your motor sequences in your body. And so when you do a bicep curl, there's a motor pattern that originates in the motor cortex and goes to that region to do the actual movement. As you become stronger, more capable, that pathway gets myelinated, becomes more efficient, becomes faster, and it allows you to get more of a contraction out of that working musculature. And so that efficiency component, the myelination of those pathways, that's a big component of driving hypertrophy and strength, is learning how to sequence that more efficiently. And that's one of the attributes that some people naturally have that predisposes them to something like weightlifting, because they can naturally sequence the motor sequences required for weightlifting to produce force and move load really quickly. So the tempo is allowing you to learn how to do that. So like when you do a squat, you're using the right musculature, you're inhibiting the ones that you don't need. And when you're new or you're less trained, your brain you don't come out of the womb knowing how to properly deadlift or properly do a pull-up. You have to learn those things. So that's also why tempo is
allegedly
really important. Yeah. Allegedly.
Yeah. James would give a good analogy about a light bulb, and Michael would give a good analogy about a cog.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hear the word cog every single day now. I don't know how, but I do. Okay, so lower percentage on Olympic lifts, improving technique and building stronger positions. So pauses, holds, slow pulls, similar to the tempo, because your lifts, you even said it, you set yourself, the person who who wrote the Reddit post, you know that technique is making it tougher. So focusing on the technique and slowing things down a bit will help you improve the total load you'll be able to put on the bar, but also the efficiency you're talking about in the workouts. So super important. You asked about bodybuilding, or he did. Bodybuilding movements can be good, but they need more context. You can't just say like, I saw these 10 bodybuilding movements or this little template and I'm going to go hit them. That may help if you're really, really, not trained or haven't done anything like that before. But you can incorporate, I'll say, bodybuilding methods, which are really just like strength or hypertrophy methods that work. And you could use those for accessory work, or if you know a certain area is super weak, you could focus on your tricep if you knew that. You could focus on, the quads or the hamstrings if you knew that. You could also just do it with other movements as well and just do traditional strength exercises and accessories.
Yeah. Well, with the accessories, you're probably going to want to use dumbbells or cables if you have it, because if you're using just your body weight, the force capacity will be reached before you reach real, like, full failure in the muscle. So back to work prime, you won't be able to fully drain work prime, which I'm not going to get into what that means. If you don't know what it is, maybe we'll put a link for an article you can read about. You're not going to be able to fully drain that component in the working muscle if you're doing like strict pull-ups, because you'll reach task failure before you actually fully deplete your arms. So like with a dumbbell, doing a bicep curl, you could do, 15 reps max effort at 50 pounds, which would be pretty solid. And then you go down to 25 and you keep going and you do another 15. And the 15th is like max effort. And then you get a 10 and you keep going. Like you can really deplete the bicep, which is what bodybuilders do. Like, a drop set, a triple drop set, whatever you want to call it. So for accessory work where you're really trying to drive a lot of local stress and you're trying to really deplete the musculature, you need light loads because your body weight is going to be too much. The demand's going to be too high and you'll reach task failure before you reach like full depletion of it. So dumbbells, cables become really, really helpful for this individual.
Yeah. Like if you,
and they're less stressful too. So like,
because
it's usually a single joint, the loading's a lot less. So it's a lot less stressful, which allows you to keep the stress on the bigger lifts that you're focusing on, your back squat, your deadlift, bench pressing, bent over rows, stuff like that.
Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. That was good. So you can do bodybuilding. You just got to just do it correctly and, whatever makes sense. And maybe just go read bodybuilding for CrossFit. I think I actually did a YouTube. I can't remember, but there's some stuff out there and you can get some good knowledge for it. And you can start practicing, see if it works. The next point I have is reduce overall stress, which we've kind of touched probably like 2 or 3 times, but meaning overall stress in the gym and outside the gym. And this has to do with nutrition as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you don't want to be super stressed and you're trying to maximize your body's potential and trying to push some boundaries. And maybe you can't, like, let's just say your stress is up here and you can only get it down to here. Well, then maybe you shouldn't be training way up here. You just back training down 10% to kind of match where you are. If you have a tough job and some other obligations in life, and those things aren't bad, but you just have to do those things and you can't remove them, then you just can't go super hard all the time. So maybe you back it off a little bit instead of that 3-month strength you're thinking of, maybe make it 5 or 6, or maybe just find a way to implement it at all times for a year. Because you could probably still do that.
Your training intensity needs to reflect your life intensity. So if there's a mismatch there in either direction, you're going to run into some problems. So make sure you're, that's back to like 34-year-olds versus a 24-year-old. 24, maybe fresh out of college, maybe living at home for a few years, not a lot of responsibility, not a lot of stress. They can hammer it. 34, maybe you have a family, you got a job, you got responsibility, maybe you have a kid. You got to be more strategic with when you're going to hit it hard because you don't have the resources that the 24-year-old does for recovering. So leave it at that.
Or you just watch the movie Office Space and you just become that person. And you remember that? Have you seen that?
I've seen the movie, but I can't. I'm not pulling.
I'm 99% sure I'm right on this, but no, he basically just like stops working. It's like, no, I don't need to do that, and just gives up. But then they never fire him, and they end up like promoting him, and it's kind of like a hit at the corporate world.
Oh, like, that's right.
He's like, yeah, you're gonna have to come in on Saturday today. That's like the main quote from there. So that's what you got to do. Just put some sunglasses on at work, act really chill,
TPS reports,
act like nothing's bothering you. Yeah. All right. So nutrition, Sam already kind of hit on this too. Like being in a fed state, being in a surplus is super necessary for the stress because it's going to be, even if you're at maintenance, your body is going to be more stressed with the demands it's putting on to gain if it's not overfed. So surplus is a great idea, but you need to keep the food quality high. Don't just say, I've eaten my caloric level. Now I'm just going to eat whatever I want. You still want, a surplus of micronutrients. You still want like a lot of good quality stuff coming in to help you grow, and so that you don't get overstressed, you don't get overinflamed, you don't have some gut issues. There's like so many little things that can happen when people are trying to just maximize food. And I like that for the gentleman that put it in Reddit, he said he was going to maybe shoot for a 500 cal surplus. That's a great idea. Like not going 1,000 or 1,500. And I wouldn't say be obsessed if it's like you hit 300 one day, you're still in a surplus. It's okay. Like it's not the biggest deal as long as you're eating a little over and you're averaging close to 500 every day over the week. focus on the micronutrients and hit your protein goals. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's a fad right now, but it's kind of popular, like hitting X amount of protein for breakfast. It's a great idea. Trying to hit 25% of your protein goals for breakfast, get a good chunk out of the way, and make sure you're hitting your protein every day. And then lastly, I had don't rush, don't be like, I'm just doing this for 3 months. Maybe you do put a hyper focus on it for 3 months and you try and learn as much as you can so that you can start balancing it more after that. But notice I said balancing. I didn't say just shifting back to what you were doing, because strength takes a lot of time. And the more you realize that, the more you'll enjoy it, the more you'll get better at improving it and maintaining it. And then Sam just added a little point here to don't rush as well.
Yeah. I like the way you frame that. The next 3 months, there's a bit more of a focus and a priority around it, with the intent that you're developing some habits and some approaches that are like building the momentum so that you can then now do it for the next 3 to 7 years. Because if you really want to put on lean mass, that's like quality lean mass, and put on strength that's you're going to hold on to for a while, you got to approach it with that in mind. It's got to be like, okay, but I'm 34, so my goal is by the time I'm 40, maybe I'm 185 pounds. I'm pretty strong. I have these solid lifts. I feel good in the gym. And now like I have this base that's built that's going to hang in there for a long time, as long as I keep training with some sort of, challenge and rate and progression. So yeah. And that's kind of the genesis of a lot of those, programs you see. It's like, build this in 3 months, build this in 2 months, build this in 1 week, build this in 1 day. Because it's like they want it right now. But because I remember when I was like 18, I was like, oh, I want to bench press, 225 for reps. I was pretty weak when I was 18. So don't judge me. So I'm like trying to figure out all the little things I can do to try to get my bench press up. It's like, you just got to spend time under the bar. You just got to eat and train, and it just takes a lot of time. So
yeah,
gotta be patient.
Yeah, and then maybe you can take some of the things you've learned, like we said, and balancing, like maybe you're back to class workouts and it's 5 reps on the back squat and you just add your own tempo to it, add a 4-second tempo. Maybe you stay after and you do just a little bit of extra here or whatever it is. So overall, like Banana Maker said,
we're coming full circle
back to our boy. Is CrossFit a little bit less, eat a little bit more, do a little more strength,
Yep. There you go.
Just shifting the scales a little bit in a different area. And even if you just do that and keep it that simple and are doing it day to day, you'll probably still see a little bit of increase. But a little of the things we went over are just something you might, maybe like 2 things we said kind of hit a light bulb and you're like, oh, that's me, or that's something I definitely have never done or really ignore. And stretch. I'm just going to throw that on there. Just make sure to stretch and mobilize, hit good positions, get deep on your squats, train to full length. A lot of people think partial range of motions right now are the thing, and it's not. It can still, I guess, be
useful, it's a tool,
but it's not better than full range.
Yeah, it's not a foundational tool. It's a tool. Like a foundational tool would be full range of motion. But there are,
we're about to get
partial reps. Yeah. We're not going to go there another time.
That's a whole nother podcast. I've been actually reading a lot about it. But yeah, we hope that helped you, or anyone listening to this. Hopefully we helped you, and it went a little longer than we thought, but that's all right. I thought it was good. And yeah, maybe we can find some more Reddit threads. I liked a few of them. Maybe someone will post something cool again and we can do a little deep dive. But yeah. Any parting words?
Take your time.
Yep. Yeah, take your time. Rest, ribeyes, rice, and Roman's Instagram. The 4 R's of strength will help you.
You could have just said you could have just said resistance. instead of Roman's Instagram.
Well, improving resistance takes those R's.
Ribeye rice resistance.
I think I said rest, ribeyes, rice.
Resistance.
Yeah, resistance.
That's
Not bad.
good.
Not bad. All right, everybody. We appreciate the time. Leave some comments if you have anything, or hey, if you are the guy and you somehow are listening to this and you want to leave a comment and maybe give us some more context, maybe we could do a follow-up or something. But I'll be more than happy to send you anything. But yeah, I'm sure you'll do great. So thanks again. And thanks for all those Reddit comments, everybody. Have a great day.